You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2018. All right, hi everyone. This panel is There Must Always Be a Stark at DragonCon. So just to kind of kick things off, I want to say we're going to do our best to focus on House Stark and those particular characters and mostly the current timeline, but we might touch on some historical stuff from World of Ice and Fire and whatnot. But we are going to do our best to keep it as Stark focused as possible. So please keep that in mind when you hopefully have questions or comments that you want to make. We do have mics, wireless mics, so just raise your hand if you have a question at some point. I'm going to start this with introducing myself, and my fellow panelists will then introduce themselves, and we'll kind of get the discussion rolling. And then, usually 15, 20 minutes in, I'll open up the floor. So definitely keep those thoughts and questions in your head so that we can actually have like a really lively discussion, okay? So my name is Tara. I can be found across the web at A Geek Saga. I am an author and a webcaster, and I founded and continue to organize Ice and Fire Con, which was the first ever Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention in the States, and will be in our 7th year at the end of April next year.
Woo. So. It's a good number.
Yeah. So Chloe, you want to start?
Yeah. My name's Chloe. I write meta-analysis on Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire on Tumblr at liesandarbor.tumblr.com. I'm also a co-host of Girls Gone Canon, which is a literary podcast. We're covering A Song of Ice and Fire, point of view by point of view. We just started Ariane Martell this week, so we're really excited about that. And I also am the marketing director for Ice and Fire Con.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Tedeschi. I'm a 7th year DragonCon attendee. And I am a staff or volunteer at Ice and Fire Con and co-host of the Stats Check podcast.
Woo!
Hey, I'm Alaron Kong. This is my 10th year at DragonCon. First year I have not snuck in, so that's very exciting. I am an author. I write a 7-book series so far called The Land Chaos Seeds, and I am currently one of the top 100 authors on Amazon, and happy to be here.
Yeah,
So again, we are here to talk about all things House Stark. And while there must always be a Stark at DragonCon, there must always also be a Stark at Winterfell. So we'll start with the current timeline, but I would love to get some discussion going on some historical Stark figures in a little bit as well. So like I said, please keep those brains running. Don't make us talk the whole time. So what do you guys? Okay, let's go with this, and let's keep this as positive as possible. Who is your favorite House Stark character from the current timeline? They don't have to be alive, okay? Because that would be real.
I'm really distressed.
And narrows it down quite a lot.
Oh look, I just got that.
I'm gonna go ahead and already break the rules and make it favorites and make it 2. I'm gonna go with a real strong Lyanna Stark and a real strong Sansa Stark. So, please send.
Such a cheater.
I know. I do what I want.
I mean, obviously Sansa, but
Gross.
Get a job, little
I would say honestly,
I broke Andrew and my job's done.
obviously, other than Sansa, Eddard was probably my favorite. I mean, he's obviously our introduction to the series, both in the books and in the show, and I think we identify with him and kind of his burdens over time. And the more you learn about Eddard, the more respect you have for him and what he's done and what he's gone through over the ages.
Why did you betray him? Keep it nice. I have to say, for me, it's Alia. The fact that she was able to reinvent herself and be able to do it away from the Stark name and then come back and contribute something, and also was totally willing to beat the hell out of Sansa if she needed to, I respected that. So that's kind of what it was all about.
For me, it's Sansa, but I also the family is so broad in terms of how different all of these characters are. Eddard is we only see him for a portion of the first book, most of it, but not all of it, and then he's gone. But we get a pretty good picture of him because of his point of views. The characters that we don't have point of views for, Rickon would probably actually, I love Sansa so much, but I'm striking Sansa as my favorite because you guys all you both said her, so I'm saying Rickon now.
Okay.
King of the North.
I thought about it.
My dog is Shaggy.
Yeah. But so we get point of views from most of the Starks, but we do not get them from Rickon or Robb. And that's obvious, especially with Robb, that is a very, logical choice on Martin's part. He's a character who is not meant to live out the series. He is the trope that wasn't promised. So,
And is that why he gets no love? Because nobody mentioned Robb or Jon as their favorite picks there.
oh,
I mean, I feel like John is so on the nose.
And what do you is he on the nose for the hero trope? Is that what you're saying?
he's the swarthy underdog that climbed his way to the top and is now possibly going to be the guy that ties it all together. You could have a whole conversation just about where you think he's going to go with that. And one of my favorite memes is pros before hoes. I feel like it was just very powerful.
I had that shirt for a while.
There you go. But yeah, I just feel like he's the obvious. If there was anyone that had just peripherally watched it, they'd be like, oh yeah, done. It's like saying oh, Khaleesi's awesome. I love Game of Thrones. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like saying a bowl of porridge is your favorite character, so.
Hey, keep it nice. Keep it nice.
That was savage.
It's like Harry Potter's your favorite character, Harry Potter. That's all I'm saying. It's like of course you like Jon Snow. It's about him, dude. Come on, let's move on.
So, and again, we lose Eddard in the first book. We lose Robb and Catelyn in the third book.
Spoilers.
I'm sorry, but if you are here and you have not at least watched through the last season of the show, you probably should not be in this panel. But we, and even the ones that we still have around, obviously, again, we don't get a Rickon point of view, but he's also not been around for a couple books, and we haven't really even seen that much of Sansa and Arya recently. Or Bran.
They only get two chapters in Feast and Dance, and they don't get more than a handful of chapters. And then in the show, even they're just now combining, so we really miss out on them.
I forgot to even mention Bran. I mean, that's how much I care about
Well,
that.
Bran's my son, and he was up there, but. Dang, dude.
So mean to Bran.
You guys are mad about Jon? Come on, yeah.
But I guess
out a window.
this kind of ties into, where do we think the ones who are still around, where do we think their future is going to take them? Obviously in the show, most of them have met back up at Winterfell, but obviously in the books things are probably hopefully not going to necessarily go exactly the same way. So in terms of that, what do you guys see for the futures of these characters? Whether it be books or show, and I guess we can kind of go off on both those tangents. So I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, I guess let's break it by character, make it easier. It's interesting because there's a lot of stuff, obviously, book and show difference. Rickon, we all know his dog is Shaggy, his wolf is Shaggy, a Shaggy dog story. So the big joke with Rickon dying is, it just went nowhere. He was gone and then came back and now he's gone. Maybe that's writing, I don't know. But she's no one knows. But right now in the books, he's just been gone and he's on Skagos and whatever. He's riding unicorns and stuff. And he's having a good time, right? He's just being wild. So I do think we probably won't see Rickon in the end of the books make it through. I hate that. I really do. I have a hope that we see him in the books at least on Skagos alive, but I do worry we are going to lose him. I don't know if there's any spicy Rickon takes, but it's kind of where else, he's not going to come back to the fold because there's already enough to people like to push the idea of a Stark civil war with Jonsa and the whole thing of Bran coming back and he's the Lord now. No, that's not going to happen. They're just going to be happy to be together and not dying or being abused or they're all just going to come home. So I don't see Rickon coming back because his claim would kind of throw a big anchor in it with the Northern Lords and everything. They would have a big wrench right there.
Yeah.
I don't think he's coming home.
Yeah, I agree with that on Rickon. And same with Bran. he's just going to become a tree.
Get out. That's not a thing.
Well, and I like the point of that when they get back together, that there probably won't be some sort of Stark civil war. That's not what this family has ever been about. When Jon receives the news that Robb has kind of named him the heir, he's like, but wait, Sansa. you know. And of course, there's the whole, you know, argument that Rob made. Well, she's married to Tyrion now, but like, John still first immediately thinks like if she wants it, she can have it. And I don't think Arya wants to be in Winterfell, maybe, but she is also changing and growing so much that even if she ends up back there, will she stay? And I certainly don't see her in that sort of like leadership position. That's not the type of person she's ever been. So what do you think?
No, I mean, I agree. Arya and Sansa, I mean, they were able to come together at the, recently, but I don't see them being compatible long term. I mean, they're very much, again, like Arya's individualistic, whereas Sansa is the kind of person who is sort of fitting the role of what her family was meant to be, and they're almost like, am I? Hello?
The mics are very, you have to like talk into them.
Talk to the mic.
Okay. So I'm just saying, I feel like their life trajectories are completely opposite, so where they would end up has to be like, necessarily be different. But honestly, for Rick and I always just kind of had this thought that like, there's going to be obviously something horrible. Somebody might die, possibly. But like, I'm just seeing him as like the guy at the end of like 300 that's got one eye left and he's telling the story. And then, in the background, it's like 300 spots. And it's good. I mean, like, I just sort of see him, finally like validating himself as just like, jacked up on steroids after, working out for forever. And then that's like the next thing. And it's like, tune in next week for a spinoff kind of thing. That's kind of what I saw.
Well, I mean, and there's the whole, the Brienne storyline where she is spending all this time looking for Sansa and never finds her. And to be honest, like, how do we know that won't be the way they go with Davos and Rickon, where he searches but never really, or runs into him, but it's kind of even... As much as I don't want to use the show as an example in this situation, like when Brienne runs into Arya, that is something that could very likely happen with Rickon, because he was already kind of wild child, and now he's been like living on Skagos with unicorns and cannibals. I mean, who wants to go back to Westeros and deal with like home accounts and feeding the peasants?
Yeah, well, especially because, like, in the crypts, like, when they were trying, like, Shaggy Dog jumps out in the crypts in the book, and I think they do it in the show as well. It's been a while. But Shaggy Dog jumps out, and it's explained in the books especially, like, this wolf is wild. Like, Rickon, you need to control him. He needs to be chained up. And I think Rickon going to Skagos and being that wild child, that's either he's going to die or just never come back. There's nothing for it.
All right. So, like I said, you guys, if at any point anybody has a question or a thought or a topic you want us to touch on, just raise your hand and somebody will bring you a mic. I think we have one up front. I just want to make sure the people in the corners can hear. This room gets a little dodgy.
In the back.
Oh, we got one right here.
Oh, sorry.
You're good? Who's going first? Who's going first?
Catch it.
Why are you
No one knows.
So I know there's a lot of like talk on like the web about like the Great Northern Conspiracy with regards to the Manderleys and all that. So like you guys were saying that like Rickon just might come back. So in terms of that storyline, do you think just like in the books he might, like Davos might find him, but he just chooses not to take part in that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that could go. So we're saying that, he could come back where, he goes to Skagos, and Davos goes to Skagos, just doesn't find him. Davos goes to Skagos, and he's super feral and says, hey, I'm not coming back, or he's already been eaten by cannibals. I mean, any of those are possibilities.
Well, and also, why would Rickon want to, right? So he's in the books right now, he's 5, maybe 6, so... I mean, this war and all of this, like king this, king that tore his family apart. It's even said in the books, Rob says, like, mother, he doesn't even know you anymore. Like, you need to be with your sons, to his mom. He's like, they need you. They don't even know who you are anymore. Rickon walks around going, like, where's mom? Where's dad? So when he's old enough to even grapple with it, why would he want to return to that institutionalism? Why would he? He's never had a want to rule. He never, after losing his family like that, why would he? He's just been hanging out with wild people on the island, surrounded by like obsidian and unicorns. I'd stay there.
And I think that's an important one, the influence of the people who he's with. So he's got this substitute mother figure, who's teaching him this independence, this free thought, this doing what you want, going off. It's just like, just like Ygritte was trying to convert over Jon, except for he was already fully formed. He was through into his teenage years. This is way before in your formative years when you're much more vulnerable to being convinced to going off and doing something cray-cray.
But I do want to see him like with furs all over him, like running around with spear in his hand on top of Shaggy Dog riding around. Like that would be cool. I'd like to see that. I hope we see that. That'd be neat.
Well, and that actually kind of goes into a good point that the older John and Rob especially, they were formed by their interactions, particularly with Eddard as their father figure. But the younger ones, they were taken away. That was all taken away from them so young. I mean, even Sansa, she is very much influenced first by Cersei, and then eventually by Marjorie, and currently by Littlefinger. Arya is influenced by Yoren, and then just later her general experiences in just the hell that she lives in at Harrenhal, and then by Sandor Clegane, and now kind of being clearly groomed by the House of Black and White, and Bran, on the other hand, he was good for a while in the sense that at least he had the reeds, but now he's got Bloodraven in there, kind of teaching him the ways of the Weirwoods. So, what I guess which characters do you guys think were influenced? Were any of these positive influences, or are they all just kind of negative influences? And that when these kids come back together, maybe they won't mesh as well as we'd hope.
But an influence is what you take from it, right? I mean, even a negative influence can be a positive influence. I mean, it's something where you learn a lesson and you're able to interpret that and turn it around. That's the whole thing with Sansa, is that even though she's dealt with one good character and two despicable characters that she's learned from, she's able to turn that into stuff she can use for
I'm gonna
positive.
let that slide, Andrew.
Same with Bran, who's had to deal with some unsavory characters as well, and he's turned that around.
I agree that, when you're talking about like the positive or the negative influences, it's like, so what is positive? What is negative? Obviously, it's not based on like, these sort of influences or the judgments that we have now. Going through this, for me, it's like if they're still alive, that's pretty positive. It's like, because they've kind of made it through. And I mean, even like some of the most reprehensible characters, they were learning and it still slaughtered, an insane amount of people to then still survive. I don't know. I feel like that's like the one sort of like common thing that he's saying is like, if you're living, you're doing something right.
I think there are things like each kid obviously has, if you look at them from like a barrel scope, and you go, okay, Sansa's obviously the kid that's learning politics in the family. Arya is the one that's getting advanced training in swordsmanship and fighting and obviously being a sick assassin. Not good for like a child murderer thing, but we'll get on that. Just a little trauma. We need a little trauma in the evening on a Saturday, right guys? You look at each one has a certain thing. Bran obviously has this huge wisdom now. He's becoming a tree, as we've said. He's being able to see everything that's ever happened or could happen or any variable in time. I was going to say in time and space, but not so much. But you look at how they're influenced by these people. Sansa is taking her people that are influencing her, and she's learning kind of what not to do. She's seeing their mistakes, especially in the villains. I mean, we can outright say that Littlefinger is a villain, and Cersei is not a good person. She's a very flawed and lovely, and she deserved better villain, besides like the murdering her friend and all that. And there's a couple weird things there, I guess, whatever. But I'll let that slide. It's very sad. But I mean, they're just they take these influences. Arya, obviously, okay, House of Black and White, maybe not the best thing for like a 10-year-old girl, right? Like maybe not the best influence, but she is learning from that, and she's not, a lot of people think, oh, she's becoming no one, and she's gonna be an assassin forever, but there's so many passages and even moments in the show where Arya sticks to her home. They all stick to the north. Even Bran, people think he might stay in the cave forever with Bloodraven, or people think Bran's gonna become a villain, and that's silly. Bran is a little boy who loves his family and misses home and just is misguided by wrong people, which is kind of what all of them are doing.
Yeah, with Arya especially, the one passage like where she refuses to let go of Needle. That's how that's going to come back. They're not going to forget that she left Needle in the staircase.
And I mean, it's great because they all love each other. She even thinks to herself, she talks about how Needle was Jon Snow's smile. Of course, we can all get sad for a second. But I mean, she even says, it's even Sansa. So, I mean, they're family, they all love each other, and the ones that can get back together will get back together. It's not about Stark against Stark. It's about banding together and not being that lone wolf and surviving the long night when it comes.
We have a question over here.
Going off of that and kind of the influences there have, what do you think about the fact that
I mean, obviously John's dead, but the rest of them having kind of twisted parallels of their parents' youth. So Sansa is up in the Eyrie, but she's with Peter Baelish, who hung out with Catelyn when she was a kid, and Arya tracked across the Riverlands, her mother's home, but with a sword of Baratheon, and Bran tracked way up north instead of way down south with reeds, like Ned did when he went and found Baby John. So what do you think about those kind of parallels?
Martin is big on parallels. Sometimes he's very on the nose. I mean, one of the novellas that he just wrote, he had a guy who was named Davos who, had severed fingers and an onion sigil, and he had another character called Sam Tarley who was ferocious and a good warrior. So he sometimes is on the nose. So it's not above Martin to make those comparisons and juxtapositions, even if they're kind of obvious.
At a Worldcon a few weeks ago in Texas this year, he said something, someone asked him a question asking, what makes you do these parallels? Like, how deliberate are they? Do you sit there and think, oh, I'm so clever, and do them? But George even has said, no, that's how it should be written. A good writer should write those things into his story. He should take into the idea of background and history. I mean, and there are so many different Stark characters from history. Like, there's John L. One-Eye, who ended up, commanding in the Night's Watch, or not commanding, sorry. He ended up having family that commanded in the Night's Watch, but he stayed off and he became the Lord of Winterfell, and then he married his niece, Sansa Stark. Like, there's all these weird parallels in their history where George just goes back and forth on it. So it's really cool that he pulls the parallels, and the other thing that it kind of pulls is that these kids, the story, it transcends being about these big characters. Yes, we love crazy Cersei chapters and scenes in the show, right? Like, she's crazy. We love that. We love seeing these villains, fail or win just because it keeps the story moving on and it keeps things happening for our protagonists. But the story isn't really about those villains. It's about the kids. It's about what they become, what they build after this war against the others. It's about Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran resettling the gift, something Ned could never do after the long night. It's about all these different ideas of what the future could be and making a better world for them, that they don't have to live in this awful feudal society like their parents did, be sold off like broad mares or have to lie to keep your sister's son safe. It's about fixing that. And so I think what's really important to keep in mind is that those parallels show Sansa's stuck with a creepy jerk, and she has to overcome that and be more astute than him, which she will have. And cry about it, Andrew. And I mean, it's just about getting to that point, and I think that's really what the story kind of harnesses in these kids. It's not about Cersei or Littlefinger. It's not about Jaime. It's not about those people. It's about these kids.
I have nothing more to add.
Oh, we got it.
Sorry, there's one in the back.
Okay, so going back to talking about Bran being just a little kid who misses his family, and he said that he wouldn't stay with Bloodrick forever. How do you kind of mesh that with the possibility that going, to one of Melisandre's visions, who even though she is a relatively flawed interpreter of those visions, but the association with Bloodraven and Bran with the Great Other.
I love that chapter, by the way, and that passage. It's a really good passage. Melisandre in the books, she gets her one point of view chapter for the first time, which was an awesome chapter because we were all just like, what? Melisandre chapter? And you just get all this insight where before, and George loves to write like this, that, sometimes you just see the villain from off screen and they look flawed, right? Like, you don't know if they're a villain, if they're good, if they're bad, you don't know their motives. And it turns out Melisandre just has some faith in a wrong place or doesn't interpret it right. And I don't think, that vision, she sees them, that's them, and they're all connected. I'm sure we don't know, obviously, the real wits of the magic, but they're all kind of connected, right? Like the Weirwoods and the Red God, they're all seeing certain things, and a lot of it is through blood magic, obviously, is big. So it all kind of weaves in and connects somewhere in that Weirwood net, and I do think she was probably just seeing them while they were seeing stuff in the Weirwood.net, That's where I really think it comes in. They're both just on CCTV at the same time.
Hi guys. Awesome. So I've struggled a lot with these books. This is really the book series where I really like some of the villainous characters, and I normally don't. but I've really struggled personally, specifically with like Jaime Lannister and his journey in the books and all of his point of view chapters. That wow, I really like him, and then strong dislike, and then damn, I hate him. Wow, I really like him. So just have you guys also related to that at all?
Jamie is one of my favorite characters in the books, and obviously he's much different in the books than in the show. But I mean, that's a similar struggle, and we see that with a lot of characters, that they're kind of, they have these moments where you really identify with them, you really connect with them and their struggles, and you're like, wow, this is really real. Like, you feel this, and you're like, well, then how the F did you turn around and do this other crazy thing? And
I think that also, like, we have to keep in mind, like, characters like Catelyn, who are kind of universally, like, there's a lot of people that dislike Catelyn.
Only Cat.
I'm not a mom. I don't have that sort of maternal instinct. So when I first read Catelyn's chapters, it was kind of like, ooh, I guess this is okay. But, like, the more I read the books, not just, like, I kind of liked her throughout them more and more the first time I read them, but in subsequent rereads, she really, like, grows on you, which I think a lot of these characters do. And she's not a villain necessarily. She was never a bad character, a bad person, whatever. But there is a lot of that, like, and I think that speaks to Martin's writing. I think Sansa's probably also a good example for, maybe not me because I loved her from the start, but, like, a lot of people have to grow to like Sansa.
Have to remember she's 11.
And that speaks so much to George Martin's, character development, and of course the Starks are kind of also like Jaime and so many other characters shoved into these situations where they're forced to have these sort of just beautiful arcs, whether they're beautiful in, like, a sad, disastrous way, like Arya maybe, or like even Sansa. She's not in the greatest, safest place right now, but she's still come leaps and bounds from who she was at the beginning of the series.
Personally, Jaime was always one of my favorite characters because he felt like one of the most real. He had one sort of defining moment in his life that changed the trajectory and changed how basically the entire world looked at him and how the entire world treated him. And then so it's like, okay, so what would one of us do if we had to fill this role? Would you sort of just fly in or, like, fall over? Or would you be like, all right, well, I guess I'll live up to this role now and then live through it? And when you look at it from, like, that screen, you kind of see the justification for what he did. Yeah, he's still a dick, but at the same time you're like, well, what were kind of the other options, especially when you look at the other influences and the fact that he's one of the sort of leading powers of the known world. So I mean, yeah, I get what you mean back and forth, but, like, also it felt like it made it more real for me than a lot of the other characters, personally.
Yeah, they're all very gray. I mean, that's how George writes these characters, right? They're not, I mean, like we said, Cersei, you love to hate her, but you read her chapters and she's very sympathetic. You realize why this person has become this way. And George is really good at writing those traumas, like why Ned didn't do the political thing you think he should have done and keep his head. Why Ned got screwed over in the end, as we know, but you look at his past traumas and things that have happened to him, and, like, you realize, oh, that guy's traumatized because he had to go to war and kill a bunch of people and then go have his sister die in his arms. So, and, like, get promised to take on this huge weight of the whole entire nation of having this secret Targaryen child, bastard, we don't know, whatever. King, we don't know. We don't really know. It's not canon yet. And, but so, I mean, you look at the things that influence those decisions and how those people act, kind of. I mean, he writes gray characters. No one is, except maybe Euron, like 100% evil. Everyone else is just like, okay, Victorian Greyjoy, kind of just dumb. But, like, everyone's flawed.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions?
some other
Where is it
questions.
next? Oh, we got,
I have a
where's the
question.
mic? Yeah.
I was just trying to get your attention. It's a comment and a question.
Oh.
So my comment is that I'm a firm believer that Jon and Sansa will fall in love and get married. Everyone makes fun of me for this. I had a bet going on with my dad, but I think there's a lot of evidence to support it in the books, the TV show and the books, but mostly the books. I could talk about that for a while, but I won't.
Oh no, every girl in the world is standing up right now, guys. We all know.
My question is, I think I heard something about the original Sansa Stark, maybe the one that married her uncle, but that she was the prize to be won in this tournament. and the suitors were all from these great houses.
You got that.
Yeah. So that's a different, it kind of gets pretty stacked up. There's so many different things in the books, but that's a different theory. Jansa, it sounds unappetizing. If you don't like it, I get it. I don't think that they'll fall in love first. It's going to be a very political marriage because Sansa's the key to all these kingdoms, right? So she's right now where her father grew up, and the only other choice in the Vale is Littlefinger. So
which is a great choice, solid choice.
Good job. Good job. Right though. So obviously it's like, okay, if you had to choose between someone who's been learning to be politically astute, who is, Valiant Ned's other precious little girl, it's a great place for her to be and a great place for her to try to use to come home from is the Vale. But she knows the people of Vale now. She's going to know the people of Vale. She would have claims on pretty much there. Riverlands could go into disarray depending on who dies, who lives, who, etc., which that's, every day. She has obviously a great claim on the North, whether or not she was forced into a marriage with Tyrion Lannister against her will at age 12. And jot that down. Just making sure we all remember. So Jon being revealed as a Targaryen or a Targaryen bastard does put his legitimacy as a ruler or a leader in the North or wherever he ends up kind of into question when that gets revealed, right? So I can see, especially with the Cat and Ned, parallels with them too, obviously, of learning to be in love, binding together to recreate the nation after it's all destroyed. But I think if it happens, it's not going to happen until Dream of Spring, very end of it. There's so much that's going to happen, so I don't think we would see a lot of it, but it's totally possible. On the Sansa, it's the Ashford theory, what you were referencing, and that's basically that there was a tourney at Ashford where the daughter of House Ashford, for her name day, they basically were having a tourney, and there were 5 suitors in the row, is what we're saying for Sansa, that match up, that the people that ended up being defeated. Oh my God, how does it start off, Tara? It starts off with, I can't remember which one, but it's basically there's a Baratheon, there is a Baratheon, a Tyrell, a Lannister. It basically ends with a Targaryen though. And so a lot of people take that theory and think oh, is Sansa gonna end up getting with fake Aegon? That would be a great thing for the North, but there's no way. We all know what's going on there. Let's be real. He's getting with Arya and Martell, and they're all gonna die. And it's just what happens to Martells in this story, you guys. And it's sad, but it's true. So Sansa, though, people think could maybe get with Jon from that, which that could be a thing. But like I said, George doesn't deliberately write this to be all the time, this is what's going to happen. Sometimes he does, but I don't know if he'd be too on the nose with that one. I don't know.
Well, and I think it's also important to keep in mind, and this is something we talked about in our Targaryen panel yesterday, that the people of Westeros are not into the incest, guys. That while there might be a thing in the end where some people who are related end up together, it is really important to remember that I don't think that's going to change. I don't think, and I'm not just talking about the faith and the faith militant and everything, I'm talking about generally the people of Westeros. They never were really into the whole sister wives thing.
Right, but they're technically, in this case, assuming the parentage goes the way it's shown to go. They're cousins, which is okay. I mean, Tywin Lannister married his cousin. Joanna is his cousin. So that first cousins is okay. We're on West Virginia rules.
No offense, West Virginians. Was there another question? Yes. Who's next?
Hey, you all seem to agree that Rickon is never coming back, right? And then in the next breath, you said the show is all about the kids and how they come back together and fix things. How do you square those two concepts together?
I mean, that's the thing is, especially with talking on POVs. So Rickon, it's also so what happens if Rickon comes back? Especially with the Shaggy Dog story, it all points that way that he isn't going to come back. But it is about the kids. So yes, Rickon exists-ish. But and I love my small feral son so much. I do. He's just, there's that part. I was watching, full level. I was watching some Game of Thrones fan-made music videos earlier, right, before I came here. I was like, let's have a glass of wine and relax. And get sad about how Stark. There's that line in the show, which the actors in the show are the best part about the show, right? Can we all agree? They're so good. And Rickon, his actor, oh man, there's that line where he says, I'm your brother. I'm supposed to protect you to Fran. And it's you're just this little child, this little such tragic child. It's like, nah, there's so many Starks, we gotta kill a couple off, is what I'm saying, story-wise. I mean, as sad as I am, what I'm saying, I really sound a little sociopathic, sorry.
No, but
I'm really sad at one moment. And
you have to be worried about the future of this house. You're not worried unless you're starting to see the heirs
something
drop.
on the line.
Yeah.
You need something on the line.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Segueing from that, do you think we'll see the Battle of Bastards in the book, and how will it play out if it does?
Stannis wins.
So I think like the Manderleys with their like heavy amount of heavy horse, it's commented on how they have a lot of cavalry, could perform the exact same maneuver that they did with the Vale Knights.
Yes.
Well, I mean more like, do you think we're going to see a conflict between Jon and Ramsay?
No, not
John's
directly.
That's more the point.
Yeah.
Who's Jon Snow? Does anyone know who this Jon guy is?
I think we got one over there on the right.
We're all assuming that John's gonna actually come back, so I was wondering,
Is he
if you
though?
informed, like, what if he comes back? That's something else.
Looney panel.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, he's definitely going to be changed. So I don't know. What do you?
I never assumed that he'd come back in a different body. I mean, like a soul change. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
I mean, what if his body dies, but he like wargs,
Like
whatever it was
Faramir's
called, to
it?
another, to
No,
his wolf or something like that.
Yeah, that never occurred to me. Maybe it occurred to everybody else.
That's like a life after death thing. You know,
Yeah.
with wargs, you can go into your warg. In Varamir Six Skins, that chapter goes into how you can kind of transport yourself there, and I think that's part of the sort of logic behind him kind of remaining more close to himself than, let's say, a Lady Stoneheart or a Beric Dondarrion that doesn't have that warging ability. So he was able to go into Ghost for a little while, get resurrected, and come back and be largely the same dude.
Something George did say in an interview is that, so there are two types of like revived whites. There's an ice white, obviously, that we know from the north. There's just ice white, animated, dead person. And then there are fire whites, and that Catelyn Stark, Lady Stoneheart in the books now, is a fire white. So when she was revived through her lore, she came back as a fire white. So more than likely, I mean, we know the ingredients that are around the wall-ish right now, and Melisandre will do some sort of magic and, you know, presto, whatever, and wave her wand, bippity-boppity John. And, but I do think an important thing is that he will probably warg into Ghost. I mean, that was why give us that Varamir chapter in that book and say, hey, like, let's all talk about warging into animals when you die, and then John dies at the end of the book. Like, okay, come on, George, we see you. And so I think that is something, though. I do think that's the way he'll probably come back of some sorts. Roughly, you know, like Melisandre, Ghost, the important stuff. So.
Who's over here first? I think.
So I guess this is a good one this question is a good one to segue into because we just talked about warging, but obviously in the books we see not only Bran but also specifically Arya and Jon warging. And I believe George R. R. Martin has stated that all of the Stark children have the power to do it.
Yep.
So do you think that obviously it was left out of the TV show, but do you think that's a plot point that will come up later in the books?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
For the books, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly even, you know, we don't know for sure that it's never explicitly stated that Robb warged, but there's enough of like the rumors that fly around, you know, about what was happening on his campaign and how him and Grey Wind like acted in concert so much of the time that it's pretty obvious that something was happening there. Probably, definitely not on Bran's level, possibly not even on Jon's level, but something was happening. And then of course you have the whole idea of like, will Sansa be able to even do it because she lost Lady? I think there's. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like there's a moment, like a little bit of a second of a moment, when she's with the like old dog. She's the fingers with she had the fingers with Littlefinger. You know, there's a little bit of a moment where you can see that the possibility might possibly still be there. So like I guess with her it would depend on whether or not she's ever even put in that sort of.
And she does have like dreams about running with Lady even after her death, so that's kind of interesting. And then there is this really tinfoily theory. So shout out if you like tinfoil theories. Tomorrow night there's a fun loony theories panel, but I'll lightly mention this. Won't go into the specifics. That maybe she skin changed Sandor Clegane during the Blackwater. No one knows. Who knows?
I'm leaving that.
I'm not going to touch that. Yeah.
It's okay. It's for me. It wasn't for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Kind of even like wrap my head around that concept. And like,
Yeah, just
okay.
Yeah.
So, segueing off of the Stark children and their ability to work, what do you guys think about the theory that Robb warped into Greywind right before his death, since that was his last words, and then he felt Greywind's death like before he died?
I definitely think it's possible, but you're getting into a Varamir Sixskins that if he warged into Greywind and Greywind was immediately killed, I mean, that pretty much ends Robb there. And then once again, if you go back to the chapter, you see that eventually your sanity would pretty much decline to the point where you are that animal.
So you're just trying to depress me more, is what you're saying. That's cool. That's fun for me.
That is my life goal.
Oh, that's cool.
Mike, over here.
So I read in an interview that one of the characters who had died in the show but was still alive in the books has a major role to play in the future. And I was reading that one of the theories is that Stannis, if it is Stannis, the character that he's referring to is, if it is, what role do you think he's going to have to play in the North with the Starks and everything, since that whole storyline is completely different in the books?
The one true king of Westeros, obviously.
Stag.
Stannis, the Starks. How do you feel about Stannis?
I was never a fan. I didn't really.
Get him out of here, Raph.
I didn't feel overly connected, and the idea that there's, like the one true king. It's all based. It's like. All right, I don't want to go political. I mean, it's all based on like the theory of like, no, we discovered this, and it's like, yeah, but there were people here. So it's like, what is the real validation and how far back you go? So I feel like it was almost like a joke that, Martin was always sort of playing, saying like, oh yeah, this is validation. We're obviously the only ones that can do this. I always thought it was a joke, but I know that like I'm not,
Well, and the show did a huge disservice to Stannis. I mean, they kind of like, obviously, I mean, the show flatlines and one-dimensionalizes these characters. We know that. It's TV. There's boobs and dragons. And that's fun. We all like those things, right? Like, that's a good thing. I'm not against those things. But Stannis, I mean, in the books, he has a defined arc, where in the show they didn't really know what to do with him. And they had to just, I mean, the 5th season, the biggest thing about the 5th season was it was adapting A Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, but also, like, not at all. And cutting it in half so that they could just move on, which is the only way they could. They do really well when they just make stuff up. So they should just do that more. And actually, they do really great when they follow the books, too. So it's really hard. They should just do one of the two. Or two. Do two. I don't care. Whatever. I'm not making the money. But Stannis, like in the books, he is the king who cared. He's the one who he realizes, to get, instead of trying to go win the throne, he should save the North to win the realm, not, get the throne to win the realm. And it's just, he realizes he's back ass for a throne, kind of. He's got to put the cart in front of the horse, not the opposite way. And I think I would really love to see him as like the next Lord Commander. I don't think he'll live through the whole books. I think he will die. He's going to burn Shireen. I mean, we know he is. Let's get real. Somehow, even if the decision's made by Melisandre, he allowed it. It's like how Rhaegar, let Elia and the kids die. He's the worst. And so Stannis will, though, I mean, I think he's going to be a force against the Long Night, and he will go out, with his fake beautiful Lightbringer, and he will go out against the dead, and I would love to see him be the 99th and maybe see someone like, I don't know, Jorah or Jaime be the 1000th Lord Commander.
Yeah, I mean, and touching on, like, with him being where he is in the North right now, either he's going to just up and die, which I don't really think is going to happen, or he's going to be key in retaking Winterfell from the Boltons.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, but there might be a Baratheon that puts them there.
Yeah, well, and that's what he's trying to do right now with
Right,
Jon.
right.
He's like, Jon, you should take Winterfell. You can have it. I'll marry you to Val. It'll be fun. And Jon's like, I don't know about Mr. Stannis. Gee, sure, my dead dad that I'm looking for his approval still. Wouldn't like that. Oh, yeah, we got that. That's the stuff.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's not wrong.
So back to the books and with Arya, and it's been a while since I've read the book, so I don't know, maybe I'm gonna get something wrong, but from what I remember, a fake Arya is sent to, she remembers, a fake Arya is sent off with Ramsay to go get married, and we presumably know that, like, kind of Ramsay knows that it's not a real Arya, everybody else doesn't really know that it's not a real Arya,
and I don't remember if Sansa knows if it's not real Arya. It's like her childhood friend. I think like Jenny.
It's Jane Poole.
Jane Poole.
Jane Poole. Okay. Yeah.
Who deserved better? Yep.
But I just wanted to let you or ask what you thought about that and what that would mean if they do get married and like everyone's like, oh well, he married a Stark.
Well, I mean, they are married in the books. They do get married, like kind of. I mean, Dance with Dragons.
Right?
Yes, Dance with Dragons, but she also ends up escaping.
Right,
with Reek, aka Theon Greyjoy.
They where they are coming up, like they're on the run. They escaped, and poor Jane Poole, she was sex trafficked by Littlefinger and Cersei. Just want to put that out there, and made to work in Littlefinger's brothel. She has whip marks up and down her and scars. She is basically, it's the opposite of, you look at Theon, who always wanted to be a Stark, which Theon should really be talked about too in this. He was a Stark child. He always wanted to be a Stark. Jane always wanted to be a Stark. She grew up in the shadow of Sansa and Arya and that family. They all grew up in this place in the shadow of this family. And Jane Poole, gets to be a Stark in the worst way. Right? She's sex trafficked. She's made to marry a monster. She suffers horrible abuse at his hands. She escapes with Theon. Right now, her nose, she's in the north, her nose has frostbite. The tip of her nose is falling off and she has frostbite. It's just like the most depressing, like worst plot in the whole entire universe. So even though that legitimizes, it kind of, they shot themselves in the foot no matter what, because even if she gets found out, which is probably going to happen soon, that she's not Arya Stark, Ramsay's just going off the idea that no one's going to care anyways. It is what it is. We have the name now. It's good enough. Her wedding dress had Stark stuff on it. They really wanted to, make the claim known that now there's a Stark there. But Stannis is going to find that crap out real soon. Soon. It's about to happen any day now.
Yeah, and none of it matters if Stannis wins and takes back Winterfell.
I'm just now starting to remember, the scene in the book, where she jumps off. I read it back in 7th grade. It's been a very long time.
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
We're all waiting.
Yeah.
We have somebody else have a
microphone.
microphone. We had a microphone. Does anybody have a microphone? We got hands up, but no microphones yet. Oh no, here we go.
Jimmy's sleeping. So we've talked a lot about the current generation of Stark kids, and Theon definitely should be included in that. But what about the previous generation? A little bit about Ned, but Benjen, who's still kicking somewhere up north,
doing the Lord's work,
and Lyanna and her secrets and terrible life. Any thoughts about them?
I mean,
many.
Yeah, there's lots of stories that could be told about that generation, and you kind of see that once again reflected in the younger generation. You see Lyanna in in Arya. You see that reflected in the same way, and even in Brandon, who was the Wild Wolf, who went down, screamed at, went to King's Landing, and pretty much said, "Come at me, bro," and he got killed. So you see all these reflections going forward, and I think that's important, and it shaped Ned, and Ned shaped these children. So I think that's really, really important for you to focus on, that all these generations shaped what is today.
Yeah, look at Brandon is a straight kind of, you look at Rob and you look at John and you look at Brandon and Ned, you think about Ned, there's this passage in the books where Ned thinks bitterly, it was all meant for Brandon. All of this, Catelyn, Winterfell, Brandon was supposed to be a lord. I just was supposed to get to go, hang and do, I guess, whatever. Maybe go to the Vale, maybe just, do whatever Robert wants to do. Hang out, I don't know, just whatever, just chill. My siblings really messed it all up for me. I do think something big about Benjen that gets glazed over a lot is Benjen knew. Just put that Benjen knew about Lyanna and Rhaegar. We get this scene at the tourney at Harrenhal in the books where, Benjen makes fun of Lyanna for crying at Rhaegar's song, because Lyanna is actually a really big amalgamation of Arya and Sansa together. She represents all of the most, I love songs and I love harpists and pretty princes, but I'm also I want to play with swords, and boys are also idiots. But which didn't go so well for her, obviously. But with Arya and Sansa and that factor, you look at how, Brandon Stark, the Wild Wolf, and too young and too gone. Robb was supposed to be the heir. He was supposed to have led the house, gone too young. He made rash decisions, and he made some not so rash. And same with Brandon, but he made very, very rash decisions. So poor Ned and poor Benjen. Benjen knew. Benjen went to the Night's Watch. George has said Benjen joined the Night's Watch after Ned came home with Lyanna's bones. So I think we all know Benjen knew.
What do you think about the...
What I took from the two different generations was sort of like a play on the Winter's Coming. Obviously, like Winter's Coming, we know what it means. But what I really saw it as was that the lies and the betrayals and everything from one generation will lead into the next. So like when you look at like the sort of, I mean, obviously the details different, but like the tragedies and everything that they're having to face are the same as before. So, is Winter is Coming really, just sort of talking about the ridiculous long seasons that don't make physics sense? Or is it really just the fact that the Game of Thrones is always going to be self-perpetuating, and that we can see that looking at the two different generations? And that's what I took away from it.
Olenna Tyrell even says, when she's talking to Marjorie in the TV show she's talking to Marjorie's handmaidens and cousins, she's saying, talking about house words, and she says, winter is coming. Now there's a motto, these other words are all silly, but that's a slogan right there. And it's not really even a house words or house slogan, it's a warning. It is a warning to the future Starks, their duty is always to guard the North and be the wardens of the North and be the keepers in the North and offering that protection to refugees that need it and fighting against the long night. And I think, especially with some of the spin-offs that are coming out and with all this prehistory that we have now from the World of Ice and Fire, I think we're going to see a lot of that in the future, especially in Season 8 and in the next book.
I guess this sort of goes back to Stannis and the comment about who I think is connected to the Starks through Rickon, and I think it comes from with the Jane Poole switcheroo. One of the Manderleys told Davos that if Stannis is gonna win the North, he needs Rickon with his dog as like a proof of identity.
Yep.
And like I think that's the payoff from that storyline. Now, obviously, I think Game of Thrones is also the king of, oh, here's a really interesting storyline. Oh, wait, the character's dead now, so maybe not, but I don't know.
It could be an interesting what if, right? It could, and there's a lot of scenarios, and we just talked about, what if these people didn't die? What if these people stayed alive? What if Rickon came back? It's an interesting story. What if Rickon came back? Does that start the Northern Civil War? What happens when he comes back? Or if he comes back without the dog, and he looks like a feral child dressed in furs, with some human meat on his shoulder. How do you know this isn't just some Skagosi kid? I mean, so there's a lot of possibilities, but I just, like we've talked about, don't think it's going to be a major plot point at this point.
Plus, winter is coming. It's happening soon. There's no time for the Civil War nonsense to happen. So, I mean, if they got to cut some people down, they got to cut some people down, I guess. That's how we race.
Is there a question? Does anybody have a microphone? Just making sure.
No, you're good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your thoughts on what happened to Jane Poole and Tyrion as being kind of an allegory for being a Stark?
Did I miss the...
The question was Jane Poole as an allegory for being a Stark.
Kind of what happened to her and Rickon. I'm not Rickon, Theon.
Theon,
yeah.
Also, it's a lot of you stand in the sun too long, you're gonna get burnt, and you sit around with the Starks and be their friends. And especially that goes with the Highborns playing their Game of Thrones. I mean, obviously Sansa didn't ask for this. In fact, in a Game of Thrones, in the chapter where Jane basically gets decided, it's really, if you reread it, it's the most disgusting little passage because Sansa, she comes to Cersei and she's just trying to keep her courtesies and go, oh, excuse me, Cersei, ma'am, queen, ma'am, please, my friend has been crying a lot, and what's with her dad, and we just want to know where he is and if he's okay. And Cersei just goes, oh, we can't have that being a thing. Hey, Littlefinger, please take care of that, right? Please just get rid of this chick. Do something about it. And, I mean, which is a big, overarching statement on the government and, people in feudal positions of power and, saying, just take care of it, figure it out, and then it's obviously getting very mismanaged. I know you're not actually him, but, you wore this outfit, you did this. And so I do think, these people that wanted to be Starks and people that put stock, Theon, he obviously has had way more than comeuppance for his behavior of what he did. And honestly, he didn't owe the Starks anything. He was never really treated, he was treated well. He was treated as a highborn that was in their house as a quote-unquote ward, but he knew there was a sword at his back every day. He knew that if his dad slipped something up, and started a new war and didn't give a crap about him. I mean, I play a lot of Crusader Kings too, because I Game of Thrones on. And if you start a war with someone else's house and your kid is there, if you keep trying to marry your kids to Targaryens over and over again, they will just kill your kid. You know, like they're dead. That's just how it goes. Like, oh, you're gonna start some crap? Okay, well, it's a blood debt. So that's what Theon's being held as. So it's really kind of depressing, everything that happens to him and how he ends up. But it's amazing that he holds on to that kind of Stark loyalty-inspired resilience through it all, because if there's one thing the Starks inspire in this story, it's loyalty. I mean, when you read The Red Wedding, you sit there and you just go, oh my God, dude, that's our people, and they just die. Like, that's our protagonists, that's our good guys.
But resilience, because especially if you go into the history, and I'm not going to go into all the stories, but I mean, they even say, there's so many times when the Stark line was like an inch from being extinguished, or, right about to be ended, whether it's through a civil war with the Boltons, or, for example, if they'd resisted Aegon when he came with his dragons and gotten filleted, that would have been the end of the Starks. But they've persevered for thousands of years, and they're resilient. So that's one thing that shows. Like Jane Poole, she's still around, despite everything she's been through.
Well, I mean, and they're resilient because if any of them actually pay attention to their words, and honestly, a lot of them do, their whole thing is about preparedness. So.
Correct. Yeah.
Ice preserves.
Yeah. We got one over here.
Okay. So I just wanted to sort of bring it back to the title of the panel. So there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, and there are suggestions of magical and non-magical reasons for this. So I just wanted to ask you all why. Why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell?
What do you think?
No.
No?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's real meta.
Yeah.
I have no idea. There could be it could be because the loony theory that there's dragon eggs under Winterfell. We don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah, they could be something magical. I do like those kind of connotations, especially because the crypts have always had that eerie magicalness about them. We know there's all the theories, like there could be a stone dragon. There could, like, what's going on in Lyanna's crypt, which the correct answer, there's a really great theory that just came out by someone. They put it on Reddit. Her username is Paparazzi. She's a good buddy of mine. But Lyanna's tomb has Aegon the Unlikely's Targaryen ring in it, to identify, that he would use to identify himself in the Dunk and Egg novellas, and that's what was in there for Jon. So that's kind of a cool little side bit. But even the magical, the hot springs under Winterfell, like all this weird, what's going on with Winterfell? Truly, really, no one knows. I think it really just boils down to, and we see this revolt happening. We see the Boltons have Winterfell, and you can have your fake Arya Stark, and you can parade her around in a, gray dress with white little wolves all over it all day long, right? But it's not a Stark ruling Winterfell. Right now, Winterfell's not ruled by a Stark, and the North is in mayhem. And like on earlier, someone had mentioned about that Grand Northern Conspiracy. It really isn't a Grand Northern Conspiracy because I don't think they're all teaming up, but they all just want the Boltons out, dude. All of them are like, this is awful. We gotta get these guys out of here.
And it's almost like the castle itself doesn't want them there.
Yeah, almost like the whole like Harrenhal curse or like the Defense Against the Dark Arts curse, If
it's not a Stark, then you can't hold it. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think about the theory that, obviously not in the shows now, but in the books, the Starks may rise from their crypts and take their
Love that
swords
theory.
and their stone dire wolves and go and attack?
So
Does that mean they're white stuff?
Yeah, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Really? I love that theory. I don't know if it's really, I don't think it's going to happen. I think
It would be really cool.
It would be cool. And it's a very huge fantasy aspect, right? We have to remember this is high fantasy. It's very fantasy. And we're going to see a lot more of that in the Winds of Winter. It's coming. We know the end of the last book. It's happening soon. There's going to be ice zombies everywhere. It's going to come faster. And magic is more and more and more incorporated. We see Bran with his blood sacrificing visions in A Dance with Dragons. We see all of that. So more and more, we could see that. It might actually happen. I do like that idea, especially because there's so much language, especially in the books, about the eerie feeling when you're in the crypts, they're watching you and all that. So I would love to see that. There's a really cool fan art, I don't remember who it's by, of Arya in the crypts with Ned's statue, different statues coming to life around her, and whites coming on and others coming on toward her. And it's a cool fan art. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. It'd be cool to see. I don't know if it'll happen. Kind of doubt it'll happen, but I want it to. Now I kind of want it to. So.
Yeah, I love the idea of especially the ones that they already took the swords from. That it might be their ghosts haunting Winterfell. Obviously, we know that there's people causing the mayhem that's there, but I do love that little theory. Yeah, I was gonna say we might have time for one more question. So does anybody already have a mic, or someone have
in the back?
Right here. We got one right here.
Okay. Sorry.
I can't.
On the right.
I think I can't see like.
Arya, and her ceiling of faces and her kill list. Do you think that she's going to be the battle card who's going to get rid of Cersei?
I mean, she is a little sibling, but I still think it's going to be Jamie.
She's a candidate, but Jamie's my pick. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Jamie, okay.
Yeah, it's Jamie. But I like that idea. Arya, I mean, what do we think? Let's say, what do you think your Arya endgame is, everyone? What would you say? What can you see?
Oh, the what?
Of like Arya's
how
endgame.
Arya dies, obviously.
Whoa,
She's dying.
whoa!
I'm pretty sure you just said Ariane. That's what I heard.
Arya,
so I was
no.
like, wrong panel.
So the question is, how does Arya die?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't necessarily see, Arya dying, honestly.
Okay,
I see her leaving Westeros, definitely, but not necessarily dying. I mean, because, first of all, again, like, she's different from all of the Stark children in that while she goes back to her home and she doesn't reject it, she's establishing herself independent of the family, unlike the rest. So I see her as, like, an amazing plot device for, the next generation of, Starks, and, like, the fact that they would have a ally elsewhere that could, come back later.
Like as a faceless man or in Essos?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see her. I don't see her dying. Partially because George's wife told him that she couldn't, and partially like the actress actually posted like an Instagram pic or something of like her kind of with like a last man standing sort of caption. And I know that that's probably like she's being facetious or whatever, but she's got to still be alive at the end of it. So, but yeah, we are at the end. But thank you guys for coming. Thank you for your great questions.
Thanks, guys.
Again, don't forget to rate in the app, and also, as always, don't forget the Literacy Action Charity. So make sure to donate this weekend.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Come party with us tonight.
Yeah, 10 p.m. North remembers. Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out my website, ageeksaga.com, or consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/ageeksaga.